My favorite commander right now is AO, the Dawn Sky. AO is a 5 mana 5/4 with flying and vigilance, and when he dies we get to pick one of two modes. Either we look at the top 7 cards of our deck and put any number of non-land permanents with total mana value 4 or less directly into play, or we put 2+1/+1 counters on all creatures and vehicles we control. AO is amazing. He is a great attacker with big enough stats that he can tank most casual bird strikes, and vigilance lets us keep bonking him into people without needing to worry about staying on defense. And since his abilities only trigger when he dies, our opponents don't want to give us the opportunity for a self-destructive block, and that keeps them away from us. That same death trigger also means he plays well into board wipes, as we can reclaim up to 4 mana from the top of our deck. And finally, in the late game, after we established a white board, we can use AO as an overrun to close out the match. Did that convince you? Do you now believe that AO is a powerful card? Yeah, I don't really either. AO is fine. As much as he has some relevant upsides, ultimately, he doesn't do very much. Spending 5 mana to get 4 mana worth of permanence on death is just not really all that impressive, and needing to somehow sacrifice him in mono white to get a couple of counters seems hardly worth it. We would need a very wide board for that to make sense. So, some kind of token strategy would be good, right? Are there any exceptionally good token makers at 4 mana? Well, there is Felidar Retreat, a 4 mana enchantment with a landfall ability, which lets us choose between creating a 2/2 cat or putting a +1/+1 counter on all of our creatures. Retreat to Emeria is almost the exact same card, just worse in every way, and Emeria Angel might be a creature but still has a very similar effect. So I guess AO could help bring these into play and then provide a power boost for a finishing attack. That is, assuming we can trigger landfall often enough. Well, the best way to bring lands into play that White has access to is catch-up ramp. While we can incorporate bounce and lotus lands, even that has a limit. Eventually we'll have caught up, and who knows if that'll happen before or after we find Felidar Retreat. What we really need is a burst of lands. Also, we need better control over when AO dies. We can't only rely on our opponents killing him, but we also can't be recasting him too often. He'll just become too expensive to be worth it. Okay, so we'll include some sack outlets. There aren't a lot of them in white, but Fanatical Devotion is totally playable in a token strategy. And then I suppose we can play Spawning Pit, Claws of Gigs, and Renounce? Then, to make sure we're not always paying full price for AO, we'll include some reanimation. And I guess since we're already sacking and reanimating AO, let's just go all in on it and do the same to our lands. Zuran Orb and Aura Fracture get rid of our lands, while Second Sunrise and Face Reward bring them back into play. The chaps trigger Felidar Retreat 100 times and adds a really nice layer of protection against opposing board vibes, while turning our own sweepers into strangely interpreted sack outlets, and allows us to manipulate our board to trigger catch-up ramp even in the late game. Now we just add some card draw and targeted removal, and I guess that's a deck. A really, really strange deck, but one that works nonetheless. There are 2 players in my local community that have recently had the same core idea and then encountered the same problem. They set out to create a version of one of the famously broken commanders that was suitable for our regular bracket 2.5-ish power level tables. One of them built an Ursa Lord High Artificer deck that was mostly centered around flickering Ursa to create a bunch of constructs to attack with. The other built an Ovika Enigma Goliath deck, which played, I think, around 40 mana rocks. It was Mana Rock Kindred. If you've enjoyed the video so far, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, I would definitely appreciate that. Both these players went to great lengths to build a version of these kill-on-site commanders that could function in a social-first environment. And they both failed horribly. Playing against them still came down to killing the commander anytime it showed up, as otherwise the game would be over in a heartbeat. This forced the table into temporary 3 versus 1s, but because the rest of the deck was deliberately low in power level, it couldn't stand up to that kind of assault. That left the rest of the table in a really awkward spot, as either we focused them and prevented them from participating, or we got steamrolled by the individual power of their commanders. And honestly, that felt like shit the whole time. I don't want to counter your commander 3 times in a row. I genuinely care that you get to play the game. But I also know that the moment that thing comes down, I die. So I don't really have a choice, do I? My perfect game of Commander is one where we all try our hardest to win, but we do it with decks that were designed to allow for a social environment and are balanced amongst each other. This is an incredibly difficult task to accomplish, and the openness of Magic makes fulfilling the social desire almost impossible. Every socially focused Commander game is straining against the system's intended designs, and so it's up to the players to work around this stress towards the experience they are looking for. Given this, I have found that the worse my commander is, the easier it becomes to achieve my goal. When I'm building a deck with an inherently powerful commander, think Yuriko, Krenko or Mirim, then I need to limit myself and hold back to find a balance that works within a mostly precon-determined environment. Even though I always say that I play at power level 2.5, more powerful than precons but without game changers or combos, that description still assumes the existence of precons as a foundation. And truth be told, that does accurately describe a good portion of my local Magic community. I'm fine being more powerful than a precon, but I don't want to be vastly more powerful, because then I'll struggle to play with the large number of commander players that are actually just playing with precons or slightly upgraded ones. And when I say upgraded, I mostly just mean that they exchanged a few cards from the deck list, which doesn't necessarily make the deck better. I have definitely encountered unintentionally downgraded precons before. Striking the balance to be able to play against those decks and those players who are often less experienced and, frankly speaking, much worse at the game is tricky by itself and nearly impossible when playing a strong commander. I don't think I could build a Yuriko deck that wouldn't result in me stomping a lot of tables, unless I actively sabotage the deck list or hold back during gameplay, but I don't find either of those options enjoyable. Let's think back to the AO the Dawn Sky deck we talked about in the beginning. AO is an incredibly mid commander, and precisely because of that, I could fully embrace the ideas that naturally formed while exploring his deck. I didn't have to limit myself to only Flicker or Mana Rocks. I didn't have to impose artificial restrictions. Literally, the only card that I'm excluding from the deck for power level reasons is Codex Shredder, and that's only because it goes infinite very easily. Other than that, I am always optimizing it, always trying to improve it, because I know that its ceiling just isn't all that high. Terrible commanders are my favorite, and discovering their puzzle pieces and then carefully fitting everything into the right place is my platonic ideal of deck building. Playing shitty commanders allows me to push boundaries and apply myself before and during a game, and that's when Commander is the most fun to me. My 3 most recent decks are AO the Dawn Sky, Kiora the Rising Tide, and the Speed Demon, all 3 of which are fine. They are okay cards. Their mediocrity is obvious to anybody who reads them, and that always has one really funny side effect. Many players get suspicious and assume that I'm up to more than I really am. But no, I am really just playing a mid commander in a deck that's probably around 60 to 70 euro budget and that deliberately avoids the most powerful cards in the format. All I'm up to is the best, most delicious version of this commander that I could cook up. It'll use some garbage cards neither of us have ever heard of before or will ever hear of again, but in a way that'll make both of us question if they are maybe actually good. Claws of Kicks was one of those. I actually think Claws of Kicks is a really good card now. My individual card quality will be low, but I'll use everything I have to try to take you down. I think a lot of Commander players go through a specific journey. When they start, they'll be playing a precon. But precons are bad. Even the strongest precons are still quite mediocre designs. After a while of putting up with that, they'll start upgrading their deck. And as they continue doing so, they'll start looking for ways to push the boundaries of the system. Upgrades beget more upgrades, synergies get replaced with raw power, and eventually they end up building Yuriko. Now, it doesn't have to be specifically Yuriko. I'm really just using her as a stand-in for those top commanders. But it often is Yuriko. And this is then where a split occurs. Some players enjoy the high-power gameplay and focus their attention towards CEDH. But I would guess that the majority eventually start powering their decks down and work towards gameplay that's more socially enjoyable. I went through this process myself. My Yuriko was the Maelstrom Wanderer, in a deck that would vomit an endless stream of good stuff creatures onto the table and demand a board wipe every single turn. I still really like that card, it's just stupid and fun to play, but it's a bit much for most casual tables, and so I eventually took the deck apart, although the Wanderer does still sneak into the 99 of most of my Timur decks. Commander is a bit strange, because it's mostly an inward-focused game. While players do of course interact with each other, due to the nature of being a 4-player match, many of the powerful interactive pieces don't function quite as well as they would in a 1 versus 1 scenario. Swords to Plowshares is a strong card, but casting it is still ultimately negative card advantage against 2 players. Large-scale sweepers are really the only way to properly deal with opposing threats, but if everybody starts spamming those, the game will never come to a close. So, from a structural incentive perspective, the only logical conclusion is for players to focus on building up their own board and their own resources. But Commander was intentionally designed to be unreliable, with huge singleton decks. The one constant then is each player's commander, as they naturally take on a centerpiece role in nearly every deck. This isn't a problem. A common sentiment you will see online is that everybody should run more removal. Always more removal. But if everybody's playing 10 board vibes, the game will never end, and frankly, I don't think it would be particularly enjoyable. We might be able to increase our win percentage by boring our opponents to death, but is that what we're here for? I can only speak for myself, but I don't mind if the game comes to a close, and I don't mind losing. I am really just here to play. Still, this inward nature means that if one player is building up much quicker than everybody else, they are likely to end the game before the other players get to participate. And that's not great either. These days, powerful commanders don't really excite me anymore, because they don't represent a challenge or what I find to be enjoyable gameplay. Like yeah, we can ramp and go infinite with Tebel, but who cares? No, the answer I have found for myself, what works for me, what I really long for, is evocative garbage. Commanders that make me work really hard and then reward me, like, a little bit. I can put all my skill and effort into deck building and playing. I can enjoy the inward nature of Commander without immediately taking over the match. I get to discover lots of cool and neat cards that only work in specific circumstances, and I don't need to worry as much about my Commanders getting removed. Because like, who even cares about AO? He's trying his best, but his best just isn't very good, and I love him for that. These days, when new commanders get revealed, I don't get excited for the powerful ones. I get excited for the garbage ones. I want commanders that are just like barely playable. Barely playable. I need them to be on the lower end of mid. That's where I am happy. Let me know about your favorite terrible commanders. I'm actually genuinely curious because I find that interesting. I might build some decks for them because again, I really like the challenge of doing so. Also, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. I definitely appreciate that. I also wanted to show you something else before I go, and that is this. Right, it's nothing. I would show you my board game here, but I don't have it anymore because a publisher wanted it. Okay, so let me be very clear what I mean by that. So the way the publishing deals for board games work is that first you contact them and you gotta convince them that you aren't just sending them or talking to them about some utter garbage. And then if they think, you know what, you might have a point here, that does look cool, then you send them a prototype. And that process, and then they check it, and then, you know, they tell you whether or not they actually want to publish it. And that process takes a little while. And I am at that stage now. So that's cool. I found a publisher that is genuinely interested in the game, that are genuinely down to test it and give it a fair shot. So wish me luck. Anyways, I guess that's the video. I hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you guys soon. Goodbye.